Hello, and welcome to the Coach's Corner, brought to you by the Endurance Lab, where the coaches from the lab recap the week and answer your questions from the forum. My name is Jason Flores, one of the Endurance Lab coaches, and today I'm joined by Taya Friedstead. Good morning, Taya.
Good morning.
And Andrea Cullen. How's it going, Andrea?
Good, thank you.
Excellent. Welcome, welcome. Thanks for joining in. I've just got the ladies with me here today. Ian is traveling and practicing his French in Canada, and Mitch is still going through his PT rehab, so he should be back soon. So we were thinking before the podcast, we needed to make sure or maybe start back up our little icebreakers here. And we were talking about maybe we could talk about our last meals. And so I'm going to go ahead and start out. Last night, since today is a rest day for me, I actually did a nice little meal of, it was some prepared meatballs with green beans, all stir fried all together with some olive oil. And a little treat afterwards was some fresh strawberries here in California is in season. So that sliced up with some almond butter. So just a little sample of kind of what we have kind of on the day-to-day. Ladies, what was dinner or what was your last meal like?
My dinner last night was mixed Asian veggies. So the snow peas with the mini corns, broccoli, water chestnuts, etc. And then I had 2 eggs that I make, like, not scrambled, but just on the pan, 2 eggs. And then I had a cup of lentil soup.
Nice. It's odd. It's odd. My wife's like, oh, what are we gonna have for dinner? And a lot of times before, whatever workout or whatever meals, but I think it may be a little different. My wife is not an athlete like your 2 husbands are. So I'm okay with like the same thing over and over, like things that work,
Right.
And it's super simple. Like before training days, I'll do rice and eggs, and I'll add maybe some other meat or something like that, and that'll be good for me for the night before. But she wants when we're out, she's like, oh, let's go get this, let's go get that, or like let's order this and that. I'm like, that's fine, yeah, but I'm like super if she leaves it up to me, it's just like super bland and simple. She like, God, this sucks. All right, Andrea, last night or last meal since midday for you, so breakfast there.
Oh, no, I'll give you my last night's dinner because this is an example of a busy week. So I had a black bean and tomato spicy sort of vegetarian casserole in the freezer that appeared this week because I was short on time for cooking. Lots of salady veg. On the one night, we had it with edamame and mung bean pasta, which is very high protein, high fiber. And last night we had just the white rice spaghetti with it because that was a little bit quicker. But my last meal was too much slices of gluten-free bread. You really are going to do this to me, aren't you?
You didn't have to mention it. You didn't have to mention it.
Yeah, I will, because the way sometimes we have a suspicion that something isn't suiting our body, and I've always felt gluten-free oats don't suit me, even though I'm celiac, and they're okay. And I had too much of it last night with peanut butter. I was just really hungry after training, and yeah, my stomach this morning running was not happy. So listen to your bodies. If you have weird things that you're not sure are suiting you, that science can't prove, often you're right. So no more gluten-free bread for me.
Definitely a tough place to be. So I'm glad you made it onto the pod this morning. So all right, we're gonna jump straight in to this week in the lab. I'm just gonna go over the strength movements that we have scheduled this week. We are in a rest week for the lab riders here in the Power Lab. So this week's movements include the stretching for cyclists, which should start to be very secondhand to you if you are doing these after your long workouts and races. I find it very, very beneficial, extending the cool down, getting that spin down and jumping off, and spending a little time with Taya, a nice little 17-minute stretching movement video that is loaded up on all of our athletes' programs. The second is a 15-minute core workout, which again is one of our staples as we go, as far as core workouts on the days we're not doing more extraneous intervals or movements where we are working on core stuff. This is kind of a fine-tunement or workout that'll make sure that we're hitting all those buttons, especially on a rest week. So it's important to keep these up, important to keep yourself moving, important to keep that core activated. That is what keeps us on the bike and keeps us at the end of our rides feeling strong and not compensating to those other muscles where you can run into issues and get injured. I'm going to pass this over to Taya, and we'll talk about a couple of the skills and the group ride that she had led this week.
One last comment there on the stretching and the core workout. If you're not a member of the lab, you can still watch those on YouTube. So those are available to everyone. And I know I mentioned I was going to do a couple of other videos. Of course, I had my my bike crash on that crit, and I am still not able to bear weight on my right hand. So I haven't been able to, even my own workouts, I have been having to modify and do them either on a fist or my forearms because I can't quite put weight on my hand, but I'll make those as soon as I can. This week in the lab in skills, because it's a rest week, we were focusing on mixed pedaling drills and mixed zones primer. The advantage of doing these workouts is not only in a rest week, but at any time really is you are gaining a lot of benefits from those without big cost on your muscles. These are not the type of workouts that will leave you fatigued. However, these are the workouts that will continue to give you a progression. You'll continue to get something out of it, even though so it doesn't, in other words, it doesn't have to be hard for it to be beneficial to you. So the mixed pedaling drills, we did single-legged. We actually did, we did a little bit of everything on that one. High cadence, low cadence, etc. And then the mixed zones primer was really spending time on the different zones that we use for workouts at different cadences. And as a reminder, every time there is a zone 2 ride on the calendar, there is something to go along with that, either high cadence intervals or standing intervals. So you can continue to practice those throughout the lab every week, really. And then we close the week with a Century Prep ride. That is a 2-hour, 15-minute workout that is the equivalent of riding really, really long on a bike. So let's say 4 or 6 hours. But because it's condensed, it gives you the same stimulus in that 2-hour.
Yeah, I think both the workouts during the week, skills-wise, definitely on point. Last week on the pod, we were talking about moving and that sort of thing, and just doing exercise to just stimulate the body. And these workouts I had put on the schedule just to kind of make sure everything was working. We're right on the spot to get me back kind of working for this week. And this Lab Century Prep, definitely for the riders who have done it before or looking at the different zones, it's something that you should look at kind of this type of pacing. Many times you have gone out on a long ride, whether it be a group ride or a fondo, and everybody starts off way, way too hard. And so this elevating zones is something that you can prepare yourself for, getting yourself paced right, and that sort of thing. And that way, at the end of a century type ride, that you are strong for the finish versus barely crawling over the line. Often we hear stories or confessions more so than anything of riders going out way too hard, fueling not going quite well, and just kind of being a mess at the end. So definitely something that can help on that end. So really great skills this week. All right, we're going to switch over to hot topics in the lab. And back to Taya, I'm going to talk a couple things about neuromuscular work, especially on a recovery week. This is a time where we can kind of leverage the intensity change over to this type of workout. And that's exactly what we've done. So we'll chat a little bit about that and the importance about that. And then we've got a fun topic with Andrea today. So, all right.
We talk about how high cadence and single-legged work is great and it's important and it's great because it makes you a more efficient rider. But I don't think we have ever gone into more detail about that. So I thought I would bring in a little bit more insights on the whys. Why do we do it? So when we talk about neuromuscular work, we're talking about that connection between your brain and your muscle. Something that you build, and even though a lot of us have been riding for a long time, you can still have riders who have been riding, sometimes even at the pro level, for over a decade. And that doesn't necessarily mean they have an efficient pedal stroke. And why would you care, right? Why would you want to have an efficient pedal stroke? So this is what we're going to go into here. I'll start by saying that the importance of high cadence, and we do a lot of it in the lab. And like I was mentioning about, just a few minutes ago when we talked about the pedaling drills and skills, etc. Why do we do it? The ability to ride at higher cadence and to hold it is beneficial to really all cyclists at any level. And it leads to improvements and greater speed and power output. So, you know how everybody is always focusing on what's my FTP, what's, how many watts can I hold, etc. Well, here is a way to really increase your speed and power output just by developing that neuromuscular ability. And what do I mean by that is you're teaching your muscles to fire up in the right pattern. Why the right pattern? Is there a wrong pattern? There is a wrong pattern. There's something called co-activation, which is quite technical. I won't get into here. But essentially is when you have one movement from one muscle, the other one might be doing the opposite movement that counterbalances the movement of the opposite muscle, which is not as efficient. Now, if you have a good neuromuscular pattern, you're activating the correct muscle when you need it, and you don't have that other co-activation that will bring that efficiency down. So you have higher cadence work, you improve your speed, you improve your power, you're able to respond quicker to attacks, you're able to change your speed faster. You can get in and out of a corner with more explosiveness just by having the ability to ride at higher cadence overall. So the ability not to just, and when I mean high cadence, I'm talking about 90 RPMs or higher.
Yeah.
So the ability to hold that for long periods of time.
A lot of times people are thinking high cadence, they're thinking 100 plus, 105 plus, when those are the most extreme cases, and we use those in training situations so that you can do the 90 plus RPMs when the time comes. And really great points with exiting corners or closing gaps. So the way this translates into a group ride or in a race is instead of changing gears, whether it be to a lower, a lot of times it's a lower gear and pushing a lower cadence, what you'll find yourself or what you'll want to change your mindset to is spin up above 90 cadence, not changing a gear, able to close that gap, being more efficient in your pedal stroke and being able to close that gap with less energy and less effort. Whether it be coming out of a corner or it be closing just between two riders. But yeah, that's where this comes into play in real life. Right.
So then the training is up at 100 or above, like you said, Jason.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And so here's a list, right, of what you do with that cadence work, and not just high cadence, also low cadence, also single-legged drills. This is all working on your efficiency. So you improve economy and efficiency. You're able to last longer on a bike because you're going to have less muscle tearing. Your muscles, like I said, will be firing up in the correct pattern, and that's going to prevent overuse injury. So you can, over time, increase the amount of time you spend on the bike, and also the high, you can increase the amount of work that you do in terms of training. And you're able to absorb that because of the way that your muscles are firing up. And then if the neuromuscular patterns aren't developed, you'll be very unstable on a bike. So we think about unstable. Well, am I going to be like a new, a kid who just learned how to ride without the training wheels? No, there is instability that you're compensating with body movement. And what that leads to is to loss of power, because your muscles and your body are working to maintain stability and sort of fighting that instability that you have from not firing the muscles in a proper way, so that you lose power. So this is where the efficiency comes from. You have good training through high cadence, through these drills, and you're able to apply power more to the pedals. So That's in a nutshell. And spending time on the bike, just riding, is not going to give you that ability or that skill. It really takes targeted work to reap the benefits. That's why we have those in your workouts, the single leg, the cadence, high and low, the short sprints. And that's also why even on the weeks that are not rest weeks, we have those in the zone 2 rides that you have between hard workouts. So do not neglect those. Keep those up every week and you'll see the benefits.
That is super interesting.
Yeah. Do you do much high cadence or low cadence training in your schedule there, Andrea, for your sports?
I tried to carry over what I've learned from you guys doing the labs when I was doing them. So I had my first 100K on Sunday, and that was actually after a half marathon on Saturday. And I was very conscious. We had a lot of climbing in it. It's a very tough ride. If someone had told me before, maybe I would have thought about it. But I was very conscious in my mind of using cadence in my recovery and when at various times. And I was surprised how good my legs felt at the end of the 100. Like, I was tired, got off the bike, and I had thought about doing a run, then thought I'd look like an idiot. But my legs were good. And I definitely think it's from a lot of the skills that you teach in the labs. Definitely.
Yeah, and that's a really good point. Whoa, am I doing it? Oh, that's a really good point that you bring up with climbing and that sort of thing. And many times we will find riders not bringing enough gears for when they climb. You will essentially what we call run out of gear and end up having to drop that cadence when you're climbing. So the notion of running for chain rings for road bikes being like 53, 42 for a standard setup, going down to 50, 34 for the compact setup could be very useful for the front end. And more riders are able to put more gears on the back of their bikes. Standard gearing being 11 tooth on the small side, going to 25 as a standard cassette, moving up to 28, which is pretty much standard for a lot of riders. But now riders even moving up to 30 or even 32 teeth. You want to try to think about your events and think that you want to have one gear more than you think you'd even want to use ever, just to have that bailout gear to be able to still have low cadence, even on the higher pitches, to be able to still spin up and have that option to do that, to get up to 80, 90, where you're not forcing yourself where there's no gear left and only, limited to 60 or less RPM. It's just going to hurt. So getting out of the traditional notion of you have to run 53.42, you have to run 11.25 if you're in a flat area, using those gears will really, really be to your benefit in these situations, especially when climbing. So that's a good point to remember.
So one last point I wanted to make here, while we're still talking about the hot topics in the lab on skills and training, is a lot of us are riding outside this time of the year and going for long rides, enjoying the weather. And we're finding that we're getting a little bit tired, right? So the question becomes, how do I know if I am fatigued to the point that I should take some days off or really decrease my training load following a long ride versus push it through it and continue with the schedule? So let's give an example here. Let's say that you go for a long Sunday ride with a group and you're out for 3-4 hours. And it's not a super hard ride, but it is a long endurance ride. And then you take Monday off, and then Tuesday you have a hard workout, but you're feeling that your legs are heavy. You're feeling some fatigue. Provided that that ride on Sunday was really an endurance ride and you didn't go crazy on hills, and you look at if you're looking at your training peaks and you don't see, let's say a high training stress score, or you don't see an intensity factor of over, let's say 0.7, then the recommendation is that you can pretty much push through it. Of course, each person is different. It's individual. You can ask us questions through the forum, but a general rule is, if it's from an endurance ride that you didn't go crazy, you didn't go you didn't spend a lot of time in zones 4 or 5, then your legs are a little bit fatigued, but push through that week of training, taking the days off as we have them on the calendar, and you should be able to do it. But on the other hand, if it was a particularly tough weekend, or even if that endurance ride was in very hot weather, that might have taken more out of you. So you might need to push one more day off before you go back into an intensity session.
Yeah, it's essentially ends up being a fine line. And Andrea had talked a little bit about it, in her post-ride, post-run ride. So making sure that you balance those things out are important. And if you have questions, reach out to other riders, other experiences, and that sort of thing. And taking notes. If you're using Training Peaks, put notes down on how you felt immediately after workouts, how you felt on a rest day. Keeping those notes are important. That way you can go back, whether it's be a written journal, which a lot of people enjoy for that, as far as your feeling and your workouts, off the bike, off the runs, or if you put it all electronic and put it in Training Peaks, use those tools so that you're able to do and get what you need, be able to look back to and what you thought. So definitely use those resources.
Right. And as athletes, we tend to be overachievers. So we tend to say to ourselves, we should be doing this. We got to go and get it done. Just push through it. Also keep in mind that if you are truly fatigued, the intensity work that you might be doing might not benefit you as much.
Right.
So really, sometimes doing less but quality work is better, right, than just volume. And that's a whole nother topic that I guess we can talk in a different podcast.
Essentially that's the situation where I'm at, and a couple of athletes getting ready for crits and that sort of local races. Is we did talk last week a bit about my move, and the time has just changed, and the amount of time that I'm able to, and the situation that I'm at, is just less. So key workouts are key. You always hear us talk about identifying what our key workouts are from week to week. Making sure you hit those. Those are highlighted. Those are starred on your schedules in your head to make sure that you're hitting those. Those are the main ones. Like this week, for example, it would be the workouts that are skill-based, right? You're making sure that you get your mixed pedaling drills down, and you're making sure that you get your mixed zone primer down. But if time runs out or life gets in the way, you're looking at that century prep, maybe losing some time or swapping that out to something like a zone 2 workout if you're needing less intensity. These are things that a lot of times we give everybody the tools to make those decisions. We empower our riders to be able to make that educated decision with the information that we give them and that the options that they have. It's not just a cookie cutter. Here is everything that you are going to do, and you do them on these days. It's more of a, here are the key workouts. Here are the skills that you need, whether it be from here at the Coach's Corner or just from our conversations in the forum. You get that information, you're able to make an educated decision. And if at the end of it all, you are able to know a little bit more about yourself and be able to make these decisions, I think, as coaches, and the Endurance Lab, I think we've done our job on that. Not just giving you things to do, but teaching you how to make decisions on how your body works and what works for you.
That's a really good point. And you are all very good on the forum about helping athletes with that. I notice whenever I check in, because learning about what the purpose of the session is and which ones are the important ones, and then how to work your nutrition around that is so important.
Yeah, and I think so often, again, and I think our time is coming up for this, is just trying to make sure that your goals are for each of the movements or each of the workouts is focused. That you make a decision on, okay, this is going to be my tough workout of the week. Making sure you're fueling properly for it, and not trying to reach other goals at that same time. Secret goals, as we call them as coaches. Like,
right.
It's like, oh yeah, I want to have fun at this race, but then secret goals are, I want to finish top 5. Like, it's really, really difficult. So yeah. All right. Was there anything else, Tia, on the neuromuscular kind of riding fatigue side, all that stuff?
That was it.
Excellent, excellent. All right, let's move on. We're going to head over to Andrea for a little bit of a conversation. We've got two topics here of note, and Andrea's all fired up. The sun doesn't go down there, so she is awake and ready to party.
That was really interesting, actually, talking about the neuromuscular training sessions. And a lot of athletes might think that they're easier and may not fuel for them. But when you're trying to build neural circuits and a brain-body connection, you need to be supporting your diet with amino acids from protein and the cell membrane components from healthy fats and phospholipid-rich foods, just to add in that comment. So don't ignore your nutrition on those weeks. And if you Google healthy fats and phospholipid-rich foods, you'll find a quick list. One topic that came up in my awareness this week was actually around carbohydrate loading, when one of my athlete friends asked what people eat the night before a race. And it was mostly girls that it got involved in the discussion. And it became very obvious as the discussion went on that most aren't eating enough in preparation for their main events, for that endurance event that may be 2 hours plus with some intensity. They're underdoing their carbohydrates. And I think, I don't know why, but we all seem to have an issue about just eating enough carbs before the race. And it's shifting mindset around being controlled with our food to, I need to do this because I've trained really, really hard and I want to reap the rewards in my race. And understanding that that carb load does help with performance efficiency, your glycogen storage, your fueling. Your legs feel amazing when you have done that extra amount of carbs because you're better recovered and you're better prepared. And as it turns out, I actually had 2 events. They weren't really races. I had a half marathon on the Saturday and I had a 100K bike ride on the Sunday, but I wanted to do them at quality. And so I was raising my carbs up as well. And just reading into it, there's not always been a positive outcome in studies where women carb loaded. And most feel that that's because the women, even in the carb loading arms of the study, still aren't eating enough or enough calories to really get the benefit. So it's making sure that you are getting enough in, and it doesn't have to be sugary drinks and white pasta and cakes and lasagnas and things, just real good food, whatever is suiting your system. Like we'll always do a double carb on the plate, like some potatoes or a root veg, which are higher in carb, but not high enough. And then a polenta or a brown rice or a basmati rice, because that's what we find in our house works for us. So I did this along with some nice sourdough rye bread, and that's gluten-free. And I found it worked really, really well for me on both nights for my recovery and for my preparation. Another thing I noticed, and I always find it hilarious, is people kind of undercook the amount of nutrition they get before the event, and they go crazy afterwards. Yeah. So you compare the pre-race meal, and it's modest, a little bit of salad and a little bit of chicken, and I'm like, you're not getting enough. And then afterwards, there's 3 pizzas and a cake on the table. I'm like, okay.
It's one of those things like a reward, right? It's like a reward. Yeah, it's tough. Yeah.
But they'd nearly be better eating all of that crap before the race, because at least it would be giving them energy and carbs. But I'd rather they do quality. So you're you need to change your mindset around it and fuel well before, fuel well during, and then you actually don't need that much afterwards, unless you have another race very, very soon or very intense training afterwards. After your event, you may just need some good quality protein and a balanced meal to repair the muscle damage that may have been done, but not necessarily load everything back up again. So on my bike event, actually, I tried boiled baby potatoes for the first time. And I find them fantastic. I had a pick and mix going. I had an option, and this is where you need to think about it in training when you have a long event that isn't necessarily a race. Do you want to practice your race fueling, or do you want to eat healthy on just as part of training? And I made a conscious decision. I'm going to eat healthy and fuel myself on the bike, but not go for the high sugars that perhaps I would need to practice for a race event. So I sort of had a pick and mix of dates, Parmesan cheese because it's really salty, baby potatoes, nougat. There was a lot going on in my feed bag, but it gave me the options for sweet or savory. And the Parmesan was brilliant because I forgot my electrolyte tablets. So it gave me the salt that I was looking for. But I was very impressed with how the potatoes worked. So if no one's tried it, it might be worth experimenting with on your longer rides to see how you feel on them. What happens when you cool potatoes is that the starch creates reverse starch, so it becomes a slow release carb.
Oh, interesting.
It is, it's a slow releasing resistant starch that it works really well. There's a book or group that I follow, Alan Lim from Scratch Labs. He's also responsible for Feed Zone and Feed Zone portables. So yeah, small boiled potatoes work really well. Also rice does the same thing.
Yeah.
So you do. I know I got a ping from Taya. I think she's going to be making her first batch of rice cakes. So pretty soon here.
Oh, so, I made an investment on this like super special Japanese rice cooker.
Awesome.
It basically just does everything itself. So.
That's so funny. I have a funny story. So in optometry school, I lived in a house of 4 guys, and I brought in this weird looking thing that I would put rice and water in, push a button, and all of a sudden there'd be rice be cooked. And they're like, "Yo, Flo, like, what is this thing?" I'm like, "It cooks rice." They're like, so you just push the button and then the rice is cooked? I'm like, "Yeah, how do you cook rice?" He goes, "In a pot." And I watch it. I'm like, "Well, that is so like weird. Why would you have to watch the rice?" And he's like, "Oh, it's so inventious, you Asians." And I'm like, "Oh my gosh." Middle of the Midwest in Indiana, a bunch of guys, like I'm like the first Asian kid that they've ever gone to school with. It's like, oh my goodness. But the rice cookers are amazing. So what that rice cooker will do, Taya, it does like the long cook. So what it'll do is it'll raise the heat and it'll lower the heat and raise the heat, and you'll get a very, very nice finish on the rice. And that's how it gets like fluffy and kind of gets a really nice finish. And then adding a little extra water will leave it a little sticky to be able to make the portables one like we made at camp.
I can't wait.
Let us know how it works, because these type of investments, that and a crock pot, can be super helpful for athletes.
Yeah, totally. And then on that topic about like potatoes and stuff like that, I'm that guy who brings like a bunch of real food, and we stop and everybody wants my food because everyone just has gels and stuff. They're like, "What do you have? Oh my gosh, what is this?" Like I've got like a Lara bar like that I made out of like raisins and nuts and like there's different things, and they're like, "What are you eating?" And I'm like, "I don't, just like real food, guys." Like, but yeah. What were you saying, Taya? What was that?
I was gonna jump in on the comment earlier on eating enough carbs, and especially for women, which is a little bit of going back to what Andrea was saying. And I've done long rides and workouts and events on low carb.
Ooh.
I've done it in medium carb, and I've done fully carb. And I will tell you, the difference is just so amazing. It's unbelievable. It's like I'm a different athlete altogether when I am fully stored with carbs, and I am never going back to lower medium carbs.
I think people are just so they're so fearful. It's just it's one of those fear things. Like you feel like during this time you need to fuel for what your goal is, right? Like you want to be able to follow those moves. You want to be strong on the climbs. And again, it's a conversation that goes back to what are your goals during that ride? Is it a depletion ride? Is it a ride that you're just kind of really easy zone 2 stuff? But you have to be honest with that. So often when people do go out for rides, it's never just an easy ride. It's never just a coffee ride. So you almost have to feel for all of those rides, unless you're sitting here either riding by yourself, like on a protected trail of sorts, or on the bike watching a show, and your ERG or something is giving you indication that you're staying in a low zone. Those are the times you use that. Otherwise, you can't. You've got to fuel, because there's always something that's going to push you, above threshold, into anaerobic. It's something, and those are the things that you want to feel strong for.
Yeah, I read something a couple of years ago about how our brain, it knows what our stores are. So I would assume on a race day, when we've tapered that little bit and stored up on our glycogen stores and we're fully recovered, our brain I think we're almost ecstatic when we start because our brains, they know the fuel tank, and we pace based on that. So that's why we feel so amazing and we have a super performance. So it really, really is worth doing, for especially for that A race where you really want to give it everything. And it does, like Thea said, it feels like a different race. Like I was only meant to have a little trot around the half marathon on Saturday, and I just felt so strong that it was easy to do a good time. I wasn't even pushing my heart rate high because I had it in my legs because I'd eaten to fuel it, knowing that I had the next thing afterwards. So it's worth trying. It may take a while to fully get there, to wrap your head around it. So choose foods that you're comfortable with. Like for me, I love polenta. It's easy to eat. You can have it for your breakfast cold, the same with the rice. So practice and choose those sessions during the week that you want to practice those kind of race breakfasts and a little bit more carbs for, and you'll start to feel the benefit.
Yes, talking about carb usage and stuff in the running world, there have been some new things that come through. I was going to ask Andrea if you had any experience with UCAN Superstarch, or the new one that a lot of runners at Boston were using. It's called Marutan, Marutan. And I think there's a cycling group that's gotten on it too, but it's just a slow releasing carb. Are you familiar with it at all?
I know Generation UCAN. I tried it actually. I didn't really. I kind of found I wanted to have a gel as well. And it's not that I would be very fuel efficient. I have done the RER studies. Now, it was a couple of years ago when I probably was eating slightly lower in carb, but I'm definitely a good fat burner. Like this morning, I didn't eat much and I ran an hour and a half on purpose because that was what my session was about. So I think they're worth try. They're probably better for training for those longer rides, or using real food that has some fat or protein in there as well to slow the sugar release, along with your potatoes and stuff like that. On race day, the UCANs, and there's an Italian company called Ethic Sport. They've just patented a wonderful slow release carb starch that they're probably better for those people with gastro problems. So if what you're doing is the simple sugars, your multiple transporter, like your fructose, glucose, maltodextrins, if they're working for you and not causing any problems and you're racing well off them, do that because it's the cheaper, simpler option. If you're running into problems, or for training, it's worth trying these slow burner starches. But again, you could make your homemade rice balls and your baby potatoes where you're actually getting nutrition in as well as carbohydrate. Is that other product you mentioned the one that Project Nike started?
Yes. Is it the one for when they did the 2-hour marathon try? Is that what you're thinking? Yeah, that's the one.
Is that it? Yeah. That forms a gel in the stomach. That one didn't make.
Oh, that's right. It's a super high carb one, right? 90 grams, I think, per an hour is what they're trying to go for in that one.
Yeah, and I think that formed a gel in the stomach, which didn't make sense to me because the stomach is the limiter anyway in how much we're absorbing. And for like a fast marathon, you just want to get as much in as possible from your multiple transporters. So I wasn't fully convinced on what I read about that one. But maybe there's more science to come and I've maybe missed a bit in the meantime. But when I saw it, I was like, oh, it doesn't really make sense. When the fructose, glucose, maltodextrin mix will kind of achieve the same.
I think the only catch as far as for multi-sport athletes is how are you going to get your hydration in if what's in your bottle is your fuel? You know what I mean? And you can only take in that amount during that hour. Then you're going to need to bring something else to get your actual hydration or electrolytes or that other part of it in. You know what I mean? So it kind of runs into a situation.
Yeah, it's a problem in hot weather, like somewhere like Kona, where you're trying to meet a huge hydration and electrolyte intake and sugar intake. You're having to do it a couple of different ways, and then making sure your stomach can tolerate it and not getting on the back foot where the stomach starts to kind of shut down. Because once you hit dehydration, you're in big trouble with digestive function as well. Or when you get too hot, practice. It's getting to know and being relaxed. I think nerves is we tend to solve problems in a strange way as humans. And usually the gastro problems are our heads. We're nervous, we're anxious. And it's working on that rather than trying another product, if that makes sense.
Yeah, a lot of it is exactly. All right, excellent. Was there anything on in this section here for comments? I think we did a very good coverage on kind of what we need to be doing here as far as making sure we let everyone know it's okay to eat, making sure you have what you need for those workouts, and make yourself free. Was there anything else, Andrea?
Yeah, there was just one thing that was sort of niggling on my mind last night when I was thinking about Corner, and it's trying to encourage, and maybe we can start a discussion about it, is sort of more open-minded thinking around things. We tend to read an article online and it'll say, do this, and then we're off doing that, instead of asking, oh, this athlete was talking about, let's say fat adaptation, because it's everywhere. But how do they know they were? You know, or is it just their story? Did they know that that was actually the thing that made them better? Were they doing other things at the same time? So start to get cynical, I suppose is the word, and ask questions before you just jump in completely, and try and keep a bigger picture view on things. So when we talk about fat adaptation, it's brilliant, but you also want to be strong and powerful. You also want the ability to absorb intensity within sessions. So your fat adaptation isn't going to make you necessarily stronger or more powerful. So it's keeping that in mind. Considering body composition ideals versus your performance ideals, considering what a strict diet, the message that might give if you have children. We want them to grow up, you know, confident in their bodies and not seeing mommy and daddy doing crazy diets, not very happy in themselves. You know, I think this is a really important thing. And then keeping foods, the basics, and Thea always comes back to this as well. It's getting the basics of a really healthy diet that's possibly also good for our environment and supporting our local farmers and reducing food miles, rather than getting hooked up on really expensive fads and supplements that are just making other people money. Considering, you know, the calorie equations versus that our body is looking for the good stuff, the vitamins, the minerals, the proteins, the healthy fats. So just constantly trying to have a very curious mind. If something is spiking your interest, I think often that's the body's way of saying, oh, that's a little bit interesting, maybe I'll try that, and being kind of flexible with it and exploring, but not getting too rigid. Is that making sense?
Yeah, too often. I mean, I'm probably very, very quick to click on what we I guess in the internet world call clickbait on things that look very, very interesting. I try to pick and choose things that that we share that will provide some insight or have some good background, or at least some type of reputable source with some resources and that sort of thing. Because very easily you can get into the headlines and, you know, drop into this. Like my wife likes to send me these things, like, you know, like the Silicon Valley's, you know, secret thing for energy and focus, intermittent fasting. Or like some like crazy talk about how like all the high executives are doing this now. I'm like, well, they probably never ate breakfast before and then just had coffee and then just somehow ate lunch later. So that's not anything new, but all of a sudden it's this crazy thing. But I think it is, again, important to just look and make sure that you're taking a good look, or ask questions. You know, if there's people you have access to, ask questions like, hey, what do you guys think of this? Like, is this something that would be good for what our goals are or what we're trying? And that's what being part of a community is all about, you know?
Right. And I'll offer my experience here too. I think I've gone full circle on my nutrition because I think I've gone through so many phases. I might have covered all of them. I had the phase in my late teens, early 20s where I had issues with my eating that became a disorder. I had, you know, the time where I would only, you know, I pretty much excluded a lot of things from my diet. For some reason, I would just not even have caffeine, or, you know, I've done extremes. I've done no carbs. I've done 30 grams of carbs. I've done vegan. I've done non-dairy. I've done vegetarian. I think I've tried everything. And for me, it had to be that learning experience, and it had to be going through all of those things and seeing what the results were for me to learn. And I think that is why today I'm at peace with the fact that it comes down to what Andrea says. It is really what your body's telling you that you need. And we shouldn't single anything out for the sake of, I don't know, because maybe you read that's what should be done, and maybe you're looking for a certain look in the mirror. I don't know, but I had those phases as well. So it even almost becomes a philosophical discussion, but it's really down to basics. It's down to, just as we mature as individuals in other parts of our lives, I think we come to a point, hopefully, that we mature with how we see our relationship with food.
Yeah, and that's something that changes for all of us. And again, being true to yourself and what your true goals are. We ask questions all the time as athletes get to their A races and to their important rides and races, is that, what's your goal with this? What are you looking to do? The further out, the better. What are you looking to gain out of this experience? What do you want, on the short term, with your food goals, with your, your body image goals, and make sure you stay true to those. And that's important, because you want to be able to either have those as a tangible thing to go back to, saying, you know what, I did reach this goal. Yeah, there were other things that maybe came up that I wanted more from, but you know what? I reached the goal that I was trying to. I wanted to have better attention to, my fueling before this workout or before these big rides, and I've done that. So you pay respect to your positives and those things that you can stand upon and be able to champion yourself for. Okay. So definitely some really great conversations today with between the neuromuscular workouts and kind of just fueling and with getting a better understanding of ourselves as athletes. So what we'll do is we'll go ahead and roll over to for the Power Lab, what we have on the horizon. I am actually on this week of workouts now. I've done hill repeats with sprints and the hilly course, both really great workouts. This will be on the opposite side of the high cadence workouts that we had spoke about today. It's going to drag you real low, real down low on cadence, and then push you to really put some high efforts above threshold at the finish of those each of those intervals. So really great workouts. So definitely need good fueling for both of those. Counter-attack intervals, which was touted as one of the more difficult workouts from our earlier labs brought back by Ian here. And then a tempo workout at the end of the week to wrap that up. So really great week to get back on the bike. You should be feeling fresh, feeling strong, and we will always start the fresh weeks with a bang. And so you've got a lot of work on your plate. Was there anything else, topics before we close out today, ladies?
Oh, those were great topics today.
Yeah, I definitely think we were thinking we were a little bit light, but conversation always takes us a long way. And having kind of the different personalities we have here on the Coach's Corner really helps, coming from different parts of the world and different types of training. I think it really, really brings a great conversation in. So, all right.
I'm going to throw a challenge in, Jason.
There you go. I had a feeling something was coming.
She was too quiet there.
On the thread that we have going about share your dinner, if anyone's racing, start sharing your race dinners. And let's start pushing each other to get better at this one.
Yeah.
So that's the dinner before the race then?
Yep.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. The dinner before the race, before the big ride on the weekend. I like that. All right, there you go. You have it. Well, let's get those photos up. And yeah, if you haven't checked out the Endurance Lab Instagram, check that out. We don't do too much on the Facebook group, but the forum is where a lot of it's at. We're starting to put a little bit more on the Instagram, but just search the Endurance Lab on Instagram. All right. Just want to thank everybody for joining us today here in the Coach's Corner. And if it's your first time listening and would like to hear more about the content from the Endurance Lab, head over to your favorite podcast app and search the Endurance Lab, or head over to YouTube and search the same and click subscribe. For more information on when the next lab is, and head over to endurancelab.fit, where you can learn and you can join us to train smart, learn more, and get results. We'll see everybody next week.